Before beginning the services, make sure you have all the spare parts needed for the service you are performing, intermediate service or major service. We always recommend using kits to make sure all the spare parts needed are available. Make sure you have all the tools needed to perform the service. See the service manual for more information on tools needed for the service. Before starting the service, remove the oil plug and drain the oil from the frame. Loosen and remove the screws holding the clutch cover. Remove the clutch cover. To remove the flat belt, we need to tilt the motor. Loosen the screws holding the motor. Bottom screws first and then the upper. The motor will now start to tilt. The motor will come off if the screws are unscrewed. Remove the flat belt from the motor pulley. Remove the lid from the connection box. Always check to see if the power is off before starting to dismantle the cables. Remove the electrical cables from the connection box on the motor. Due to legislation, this work should be performed by an electrician. Fit the lid on the connection box to protect the electrical connections inside during handling. Fit the lifting tools and lifting slings to the motor. Loosen the screws carefully until the motor is suspended in the lifting slings. If the motor is not supported, it will drop with the coupling when removing the screws. Be careful during this operation. The motor and the coupling weigh approximately 80 kilograms. Make sure the motor is resting on a stable surface. When performing a service on the friction blocks, wear a mask to avoid inhalation of dust particles. Use the correct pliers for dismantling the snap ring to avoid accidental release. Remove the snap ring and cover. Remove the old friction blocks and discard them immediately. A 50 Hz motor will have 5 friction blocks, and a 60 Hz motor will have 3 friction blocks. When cleaning the clutch, do not use compressed air, which will create a dangerous dust cloud. Use a vacuum cleaner or a damp cloth. Attach a socket with extension rod and handle to the screw. Place a piece of wood so that when the handle is turned, it will hit the wood. Push the handle to start the rotor moving. When the handle hits the piece of wood, the weight and movement of the rotor loosens the screw. Repeat until the screw is loose, then remove the screw and washer. Lubricate the threads on the tool. Make sure the brass plug is mounted onto the tool. Fit the special tool to the centrifugal clutch. Tighten the tool to loosen the clutch from the spindle. The centrifugal clutch is heavy and may fall, causing injury when loosened from the motor shaft. Remove the tool. Make sure the centrifugal clutch is resting on a stable surface before removing the snap rings. Use the correct pliers for dismantling the snap rings to avoid accidental release. Remove the 2 snap rings from the centrifugal clutch. Before removing the coupling hub, rest the centrifugal clutch onto wooden supports to lift it from the surface and make it possible to remove the hub. Use a piece of wood to drive the hub out of the clutch. Turn the centrifugal clutch over onto the wooden supports. Use the special drift tool to remove the 2 bearings and spacing ring. Discard the old bearings after removal. Remove the screws securing the operating water cover. If the cover sticks, use the bolts in the threaded holes to loosen the cover. Remove the cover from the frame. Use the special tool to remove the neck bearing cover. Fit the tool to the cover and tighten the screws. Use the outer screws to loosen the cover from the frame. When the cover is loose, remove it from the frame. The deflector ring will also come off. Be careful when handling these parts. Loosen the plugs holding the springs, but do not remove them. It's easier to loosen the plugs when the bearing housing is fastened onto the frame. Remove the screws holding the bearing housing. Fit the lifting tool to the spindle. Fit the lifting tool to the hoist. The spindle assembly is now ready to be lifted out of the frame. Make sure you have full control over the lifting of the spindle to ensure that the oil pump in the bottom of the assembly is not damaged. Do not rotate the spindle assembly during lifting. The spindle assembly may otherwise come loose from the lifting tool. We recommend constructing the support before starting the service. Measure the height of the spindle from the top bearing seat and add 5 mm. Remove the screws holding the air deflector. The screws may be in different positions than shown here, depending upon the separator design. Remove the deflector. Use a spanner to remove the oil pump. The size of the spanner depends on the size of the separator. Use a second spanner as a stronghold on the belt pulley. There are two different designs on the oil pump depending on the age of the separator, but they are removed in the same way. Use a compressed air gun in the bottom hole on the oil pump to remove the lubrication oil orifice inside the pump. Rotate the spindle assembly on the support so the oil fan is accessible. Fit a spanner onto the key grip on the belt pulley as a stronghold. Use the special tool to loosen the fan and then remove the fan. Turn the spindle assembly over again and fit the special puller tool to remove the belt pulley from the spindle. Use the bolt on the top of the tool to remove the belt pulley and the lower bearing. Discard the used bearing immediately after removal. Rotate the spindle assembly on the support so the upper bearing holder is accessible. The plugs for the composite springs are already loosened and should be easy to remove from the bearing housing. Remove the composite springs from the bearing housing. Lift the spindle from the bearing housing. Take care not to damage the vibration indicator mounted onto the bearing seat. Collect the axial springs and throw them into the bin. New springs are available in the service kit. Remove the snap ring from the bearing seat. Remember to use protective eyewear. And use the correct pliers for dismantling of snap ring to avoid accidental release. Use the special tool to remove the bearing seat from the spindle. Remove the screw in the tool before using it, so as not to damage the spindle. Make sure the cap nut is fastened onto the spindle and make sure to rest the spindle on a soft surface like a piece of wood. Take care not to damage the vibration indicator when separating the top bearing seat from the spindle. Rest the bearing seat on a support and remove the bearing using a drift. Discard the bearing after removal. Remove the labyrinth ring from the frame. Use the screws in the threaded holes to loosen the ring if it sticks. Fit the special tool for the bottom bearing holder. Fit the socket, extension and handle. unscrew the bottom bearing holder and remove it from the frame. Remove the strainer on the bottom bearing holder. Remove the screw holding the wing insert and then remove the wing insert. The wing insert may have another design than that shown here. Clean the oil sump inside the frame. The open plugs in the bottom of the frame will collect heavy particles and water. Make sure these plugs are emptied and cleaned. These plugs will not be visible from the viewpoint above the separator, but it is paramount that they are cleaned so as not to contaminate the new oil. Also, clean the duct where the belt is to secure the belt operation.